Hello, everybody, and welcome to What's Up with Mo. This is our weekly discussion about Missouri politics and the future of the Show Me State. I am Joe Zahn, and now that scientists have announced that they've discovered fungus zombie spiders in Irish caves, I think I'm ready to quit 2025.
Oh God, you're just now ready. That's all it took.
That's the final straw, Peter. Zombie spiders. I'm out.
I mean, yeah, you can add it to the list, I guess. This whole year seems to already be the stuff nightmares are made of. By the way, I'm Peter Meredith, former state rep here in Missouri, dad, lawyer, I guess, and person that is deeply, deeply worried about the state of the world right now. And spiders are, frankly, Joe, the least of my worries.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's fair. Now, before we get into it, I just want to say we've got a lot of catching up to do. But we're going to spend most of our time this week talking about news that impacts us here in Missouri. Then on the next episode, we are going to take a deep dive into a few specific bills here in Missouri that have either just passed out of the House or just passed out of committee and are about to be voted on. Those are the big ones on immigration and bounty hunters, the trans healthcare bill, and eliminating of the capital gains tax here in Missouri. So those are going to take some time, and we're going to have some videos of the committee hearings. So again, they're going to take some time, but we had a lot we wanted to talk about this week. So I want to table those for our next episode. So for now, you want to talk about some news, Pete?
Oh man, I do.
Okay.
Actually, I don't, but let's do it.
Okay. So let's start with it's Black History Month.
Is it so?
Well, not if you work for the Department of Defense or basically any portion of the government that's overseen by the executive branch, because apparently they're pausing the observance of Black History Month, of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Juneteenth, and Holocaust Remembrance Day, actually, as well, just in case my Jewish friends think they were left out. Honestly, though.
Yeah, but I guess they're keeping President's Day.
Oh, yeah, of course. Naturally. Yeah. Got to have President's Day. Yeah. Maybe they'll just leave one president out. I'm not sure. Yeah. But honestly,
or make it just about one, Joe. Let's be real.
That is for sure. So we have the GOP efforts to ban books have been all the rage over the last couple years now. But
in Missouri, we know that very well.
We know that very well here in Missouri. But that seems kind of quaint right now because they're literally banning holidays, and now they're banning words, Pete.
Right.
So not that long ago, these delicate little flowers on the right said that they weren't even allowed to say the word woman because apparently crazy leftists said they had to say persons with vaginas. Remember that?
Oh, they spent decades now, I think, at least the last 20 years, complaining about liberals not liking the words that they use. Why? Because they use words that were objectively offensive.
Yeah.
And they wanted to be free to use those words. And so they started screaming about censorship, right? And how we need to fight censorship against these liberals that are censoring my racist white being from saying whatever I want to say.
That's right.
And ignoring the feelings of anyone else or the impact on anyone else. What are they doing now, Joe?
Well, I would say now they're using the R word again. They're very excited about that.
I saw Musk doing that on Twitter even.
That's right. But they are preventing anyone else from using lots of other words. So
words that aren't offensive.
Words that aren't offensive. So we have words like gender, minority, biases, and yes, woman are being targeted in the government. So agencies like the CDC are taking down web pages that are related to gender, related to research projects that are having their funding pulled, or departments are being fully defunded if they have these keywords or they're found in their papers. Other words that are in the crosshairs include, so I've got a little list here so I don't forget, it's disability.
I shared it on Facebook if people want to see the whole thing too.
Yeah. So this is just a partial list, but we've got disability, status, trauma, Black, Hispanic, communities, socioeconomic, ethnicity, and lots more.
The idea that you can't say trauma just tells me how much it's about hating people that have suffered and wanting to deny people any recognition of their suffrage or the consequences of their suffering. It is so hateful and awful. I don't even know where to start.
Well, it has real world consequences as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
Not just those which are atrocious, but also for things like
Unintended
research
consequences.
papers, like a bunch of unintended consequences. So like imagine trying to write a research paper and get government funding or a grant, but you have to avoid using the word black. What if you're doing a
Yeah.
paper on black holes, Pete? How do you think you're going to get that funding? What do you think?
Well, look, I mean, the reality is they're trying to use these words to weed out anybody that they think might be progressive or liberal in the way that they think about the world, literally just their worldview, because they're trying to weed out from government anyone that is not just a loyalist, a fascist, or a racist.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, they're worried you're not going to do what they want you to do in the federal government they're trying to build. And that's the things they're funding. That's the contractors. That's the grants. That's also the employees that are getting fired. Employees that have sent an email that mentioned the word diversity. Well, they're getting flagged because why? They don't think that they're going to be a good, loyal fascist. And I think that's really what it's about. And they don't really care about collateral damage because part of why they're in there is to just destroy the government as it exists currently
Yeah.
and all of these government programs, unless, of course, they're ones that they get paid from.
Sure.
Because don't worry, Musk's contracts are still in place.
Yeah, and we're going to get to Elon Musk because
Yeah.
I have a feeling this is going to be an episode where we're both a little fired up because there's been a lot of stuff happening. But I'm going to try to stick to my outline because there's a lot, and we can go off the rails real quickly. So
I feel like I'm already off the rails, Joe.
that's we're so
I
off
don't
the
I don't
rails.
even see the rails anymore.
So one thing I did want to mention to you and talk about is which has kind of been forgotten because it feels like it was announced, months ago, but it was just a couple weeks ago. So Trump has also ordered a crackdown on anti-Israel protests,
Hmm.
or I should say all protests
Right.
under the guise of anti-Israel protests, which is, I think we're going to be finding the general theme that runs through a lot of these executive orders. They target a specific thing that maybe doesn't seem quite as controversial to some, but in reality, the way they're written, it allows them to attack all protests. So basically, if you are protesting in a way that the Trump administration specifically doesn't like, and you are a foreign-born student, they can revoke your visa.
Right. So
If you
foreign-born
participate.
students do not get the freedom of speech.
That's right.
If you think any of us do, well, we'll see. But yeah, this is the attack, right? They'll use immigration as the excuse because look, they're just cracking down on immigrants, right? So all these people that are like, well, that doesn't apply to me. I'm not an immigrant. But the reality is, what they're saying is, we're taking away, and based on the content of your speech, we're taking away your right to free speech. And Joe, right here in Missouri, this is what we've talked about this on our previous podcast a little
Yep.
bit. Like that bill, that's the immigration bill here in Missouri. Again, they're presenting it as the immigration bill. But what's in there, or actually it's the police takeover bill too. Now they're putting it all in one. But it's got a piece that's about changing the laws on rioting in Missouri to make it where essentially if anybody at a protest, and it doesn't even actually have to be a protest to be clear, it's any gathering, if somebody commits a crime there, or if you commit littering there, it would be a felony under this if the police decide to charge you with rioting and literally committing any little misdemeanor like blocking traffic at an event without legal permission to do so. Again, it might not even be a protest, but that becomes a felony that they would be able to lock you up much longer for. Now, that is clearly designed in my mind to be able to target protests that they don't like. And why are they simultaneously in the same bill trying to take control of the St. Louis City Police? So they get to decide which protests the police go in and shut down and arrest people for felonies, as opposed to, if they didn't control the police force, they might not get to decide which speech they go after.
And I want to make it very clear that the way that this law is written now, or I should say this bill, it's not become a law yet, thankfully. And there may be some changes, but the way that it is written now is you don't have to be the one committing the crime. You just have to be there. If somebody that is at least under this law designated as part of your group commits some crime, you can be held liable as well.
So I've seen a couple different versions of this, and that is a gray area, I think, right now, because currently you just have to be there and have conspired to for the crime to happen. So you have to have been part of the intent, and it has to be a violent crime. I think that's really the important thing to me. That right now, for it to be rioting, you have to have contributed essentially to a violent crime happening
Right.
at a protest. They're taking away the violence. The contributing is interesting because they are taking away the conspiracy element, but they may be making it where you have to be the one that committed the crime. But again, if they're taking away the violence of it, then even just the crime of jaywalking would qualify now as a felony if you're at this, and that's with nothing violent happening at
Right.
the event. Period, by anybody. It is clearly designed for them to abuse, frankly.
Yeah. So far we've got we're eliminating a bunch of holidays that have anything to do with diversity. We are eliminating a bunch of words that maybe some have some kind of loose
Well, not just eliminating the words,
association.
terminating any contract or grant or government program that has any
Yes,
use of those words.
we are also targeting protest both from the national level and here in Missouri.
And this is the free speech absolutist group, right? That thinks they're the anti-censorship ones.
That's right.
Let's
And we are
remind everyone that.
only halfway through February, my friend.
Yeah.
But let's just sidestep, because I do want to mention
He hasn't even been in office a month.
That's exactly right. But let's sidestep. I want to talk about some good news real quick, because it's not quite all doom and gloom. We're going to get back to the doom and gloom, I promise. But
you got good news. I could use some good news.
I have some good news. So abortion was made legal here in Missouri with the passing of Amendment 3, right?
Right.
But as we talked about in the past, it's practically impossible, or it was
in Missouri. Yeah.
Because now a judge has overturned the restrictions on providers that made healthcare here impossible. Right. So as we've talked about, mostly there are these laws that basically were medically unnecessary or completely irrelevant to providing service,
but designed to completely make it impossible for the providers to exist.
That's exactly right. So a judge agreed, and a judge said, since this is a fundamental right now under the Missouri Constitution, you can't have that kind of garbage to prevent providers from providing care.
Yeah.
So
if it's not designed to actually help anybody's safety and does not have any purpose, then it is unconstitutional.
Yeah. So that actually is some very good news. I mean, now
huge
women in Missouri are going to have access to a really significant part of their healthcare here in the state.
I don't know if you saw the report that came out earlier. It was maybe this week that I saw it. A report on the 22 states since Dobbs that had enacted abortion bans, and how the maternal and infant mortality rates had gone up significantly, like way higher than anyone had expected.
Yep.
And it was because of all of these pregnancies that were high risk pregnancies or fetal anomalies and things like that, where people weren't able to get abortions and had to go through some really atrocious stuff because the states that they lived in had passed these laws. So I'm pretty thankful that Missouris are finally shut down for now. Now we'll see how long it lasts.
Well, we already know that there are lots of bills that are going to be put forth to claw back those restrictions,
including some attempts to amend the Constitution again and trick people into getting rid of what they just passed.
That's right. Yeah. And the ones that we're really going to keep an eye on, obviously the ones that send it back to the voters. You know, I'm personally a little bit less worried about that, because I think that there will be a big campaign to educate voters, but who knows? We saw with Clean Missouri that
they're very good at putting complete lies on the ballot. I mean, they're really good at that.
That is very fair. I mean, the stuff that I'm most concerned about, though, is the stuff where they can circumvent that process and make changes here and there in the law, like the efforts that they have already essentially decided they're going to do, which are to try to go after the term viability,
and redefine what viability means
under the law. Yeah. And so what would that look like, Pete? Just so kind of we go through that.
Yeah, I mean, they're just trying to try and narrow it as early as possible in pregnancy, because right now they're saying, well, it's an open definition that's up to the judgment of medical providers, which is really how it should be, because viability is not a clear line. It is a gray area. And of course, that concept being that if the fetus can't survive outside the womb, then, it's really part of the woman's body, a pregnant person's body, to decide what to do with their body. And after that, since Roe, there was some room to start regulating the right afterwards. Of course, what they're trying to say now is, well, if we change how viability is interpreted and define that to be heartbeat, for example, that's one of the versions that they've passed before, is the heartbeat ban. Once a heartbeat's
Even though the
detected,
heart isn't actually fully developed and it's not a real
correct,
heart, but that's beside the point.
correct, but there's a heartbeat,
Sure.
and so they'll say, well, heartbeat means it's viable.
Mhm.
Well, of course, that's not what viable means in any dictionary or in medicine. So we'll see how much they're able to do that. But I think that's what they're thinking they'll have the best chance to do. And then it'll be up to the courts again to shut it down. And honestly, I think what we're seeing over and over again is, just like the president doesn't mind signing unconstitutional executive orders and just trying, they're going to pass whatever they can pass to put a pause on services that they don't want and force it to go through the court process and all of that to try and prevent medical care as much as they can. I mean, it's just like they did with Medicaid expansion, right? Ignoring the Constitution, openly defying it, and that delayed care for a whole lot of people for close to another year because they just refused to do what the law said.
Yeah. Now, I will say that that's not the only way they're going to attack this issue. We already know that they're likely going to come after it nationally. They said they weren't going to, but our own Eric Burleson from Missouri, who is a House rep in Congress, has introduced a Life at Conception Act. So, yes, you may remember that Republicans said that overturning Roe v. Wade was just returning to the states. And in the last election, they pretended like they weren't going to try anything on the national abortion front. But
no one ever believed them, did they?
I think a lot of people. Well, people, listen. Confirmation bias is a wild thing, my friend, right? And if you want to make an excuse for your vote, you can do a lot of mental gymnastics, and I think people did. But Burleson's
about so many
bill,
subjects.
Yes, Burleson's bill would ban abortion at conception, Pete. So it's basically
like Missouri's ban that we passed.
Yeah, it's basically what Missouri's bill was. And so,
which would likely even risk criminalizing morning after pill and some versions of birth control that prevent implantation. Technically that's past conception, and they want to make that a crime.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. So it's far from over, but we have a small bit of daylight right now with women's healthcare being reinstated here in the state and actually practically being able to be accessed.
All right, what else we got?
Do we dare talk about Elon Musk's takeover of the government, Peter?
Do we have to?
I mean, I think
how can we not?
It's sort of, how could we not? Yeah.
It's
so
sort of maybe the number one problem we're facing. I don't know what the number one is, but it's up there.
It's hard to say. I mean, but he's taken over government payment systems, and he's also doing everything he can with, of course, all of this with the support of the full weight of the executive branch behind him to also try to get a bunch of...
I think he might be the full executive branch at the moment.
You might be right. I mean, he did do an Oval Office press meeting.
Yeah, we should probably talk about that.
Yes, let's talk about it.
I've never seen anything like that.
Yes.
He literally just walked up and took over the interview and just started speaking while Trump sat there looking... I don't have a nice way of saying it, but owned, maybe is the nicest way to say it. Uncomfortable and owned. And it looked very intentional on Musk's part with his kid there. X, right?
Yep.
I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Yes, it's X.
But the kid, I think some folks might have heard the kid saying things to Donald Trump, who notoriously does not like children. Waving boogers on the desk, and Trump just had to sit there and take it while the kid told him to shut his mouth, and things that he'd clearly heard from his dad, who then went on this tirade that just rambled and rambled about what unelected bureaucrats shouldn't have power in government. And he's sitting there, of course, the most powerful unelected bureaucrat we've ever had in running the Oval Office, and somehow missing the irony that he's saying that's unacceptable and we need to get rid of all of these bureaucrats.
Yes.
I mean, it was insane. And then he said we should get rid of the judiciary, because I guess he doesn't think laws should be enforced by anyone except the executive. I mean, look, this all goes back to, he is from this group of tech bros, right? That billionaires, he and Peter Thiel and a couple others, that they're pushing for essentially a monarch. They call it they base it on a CEO. They want there to be an unrestricted CEO, basically, of the government. And they don't think they should be bound by laws. And like a corporation, they think really the people that should have the power are the shareholders. So whoever, in a true capitalist country, whoever has the most money should have all of the power. And that's all that the executive should care about, because the masses are just a bunch of fools. So all along, that's what they've been saying. They've been saying this publicly for years now, that that's what they want. Well, Trump, you might remember, had asked, his team had asked, was it Governor Kasich back in 2016 to be vice president. And in that conversation, it was reported that they said to him that Kasich could be in charge of domestic and foreign affairs and policy. And his response was, so what will the president be doing? And the answer was, making America great.
Yeah, of course.
Look, I think the reality is that was reported. People knew about that. So it's very obvious that Trump doesn't actually want to do the hard parts of governing. He wants to be in charge. He wants to be immune from any consequences for criminal activity. He wants to be able to profit as much as he can from the government and be the guy in charge. He likes being that.
Well, we talked about this. The outline that these tech bros have for the United States, as you mentioned, there is a CEO, right, of the United States, which it seems at this point they're trying to position Elon Musk to be that.
Right.
And then Trump would serve as, I guess, like the board of directors.
I guess
the head of the chairman of the board.
I think the answer is really figurehead.
But that's what they said. That's what they've said. So the idea is that he doesn't necessarily touch the day to day. He doesn't do the day to day nitty gritty of actually running the company, AKA running the United States.
Right.
He's just the guy who's like sitting back and being like, okay, is the CEO doing a good enough job? Now he has the power and ability to fire the CEO and hire a new one.
Theoretically,
if he wants to. This is what they have said.
Yeah.
They want to happen.
But watching that interview, it didn't look like he actually has the power to do that. What it looked like to most people watching, I think it's fair to say, is that Elon's in charge. And even if Trump starts to not like it, he's already given up his power to Elon. And maybe it's because of the money Elon spent to get him elected. Maybe it's even more nefarious than that. But it looks like Musk is there to stay. And I think that's going to be interesting to see as it progresses. Yeah.
But I will also, just last thing on the board of directors thing. I mean, I think, if a good board of directors isn't necessarily seen, like they kind of let the CEO be the face and do their thing and take the hits. And then they just get to sit in the boardroom and get presented to. But anyway, it's very clear if that is not actually what's happening. It is very clear, at least, that they think that they are supermen.
Yeah.
And that they have the ability to see.
I mean, he's literally the richest man in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
That is now fully in control, from what we can tell, of so many levers of government. He put his team of kid racist hackers in to have unfettered access to our payment systems and all of our government systems, literally putting in programs when they weren't even supposed to have those rights. They're hacking our government.
Yeah. But it also seems like there's a fundamental understanding of these people of how government actually works. For example, with all these cuts in USAID, they've done it in such a ham-fisted way that, for example, I just heard a story last night about Americans who worked for USAID who were in Africa, who, when these freeze/cuts came down, they were just stranded. Right. And the local community that they were working with suddenly blames the U.S. for the fact that, their food assistance just disappeared. and they're left holding the bag.
Yeah.
We've left these people behind.
You say that's from ham-fisted incompetence, kind of, and lack of government experience. I think it's from just not caring.
Well,
They don't care. They just want to dismantle and destroy all of it unless they see a path to make money off of it.
Yeah.
You certainly don't see, like I said, Musk's contracts going away, and he makes how much on SpaceX and how much on, but those entities were also investigating his contracts and investigating him. There were 30 different investigations happening of his companies and contracts. Well, no wonder he wants to dismantle all of these agencies, and meanwhile dismantle all of the independent watchdog groups that are out there in our government that are supposed to be doing the things he's claiming to do, the ones that have been doing the actual audits, the actual oversight of contracts, all of that he's claiming to come in and do, not finding any of, and he's getting rid of the people that were actually doing it.
Not to mention
because they don't care.
Well, yes, okay, fair, but also not to mention the fact that just from a purely business standpoint, for somebody who gets all kinds of government contracts to be able to get the full peek behind the curtain like
of
this
everyone else's contracts too
is just an unbelievable value.
Oh, a conflict of interest that never would have been tolerated in previous administrations. I mean, it's unprecedented.
Yeah. But again, these guys are Superman whiz kids. Of course, I will say
white supremacists.
The Superman whiz kids also released a website so people could track what Doge was doing, and it was immediately hacked.
Well, of course, though, they also didn't even put anything on there for the longest time. Like, it literally just had a Twitter feed or an X feed, whatever they call it. It didn't have any actual information. They kept claiming they'd found all this stuff. They still aren't showing anything that they've actually found. The only waste that they have found is stuff that other agencies had already found. And that they were able to point to and say, look at what we found. Yeah. You didn't actually. No, they're going in and they're getting rid of anything related to diversity. They're getting rid of anything that doesn't look like it's profitable to them, anything they think they might be able to privatize, and just letting the rest fall apart because they don't care in the process. Yeah. I mean, and then the one kid that was just found out to be an open racist on social media with a past of very white supremacist things resigns, as one ought to do in that kind of a situation. And of course, even the vice president comes to his defense and says, oh, wait, we shouldn't fire him just because he's a white supremacist, right?
Yeah. Can we
That's literally going in and ferreting out anything related to diversity. Mm-hmm. And they're saying this is the guy we should defend, not all of the people that just got fired because they care about diversity.
That's right. Well, we're talking about it a little bit like people already know, but just in case you don't know. So Elon Musk has his Doge team that's helping him look into all of this stuff, quote, in air quotes, right? And one of them whose username, I guess previously he operated under a pseudonym that was like Big Balls or something like that.
Is that the same guy or is that a different guy?
I don't know, but if it's not the same guy, either way, this is the level that we're dealing with. Yeah. Well, the news, some news reporters went and looked back at some old
Wall Street Journal, that liberal rag.
Yeah, that liberal rag went back and looked at old social media posts of his and found out that there was some pretty racist, frankly, stuff. Oh, yeah. Things like him saying that he was racist before it was cool, literally. Yeah. So when that happened, he decided to resign, as Peter said, one should do. And then suddenly JD Vance came to his,
and Musk
his support, and Musk did. And now Trump also, when he was asked about it, said, oh, is that what JD Vance said? Well, then I agree. So that's where we're at. I just want to redirect and we've been talking about the funding freeze, and this funding freeze has real impacts, not just from these programs that, seem far away. They have real impacts here in Missouri, and I wanted to talk about a couple of those. So an example here is that we have the Rittenhour School District here that was supposed to get new electric buses for the school district. And by the way, that would save the state, or at least save the school district, millions in gas, okay? They also bought the charging stations. They had them installed because, again, this was money that was appropriated Of course, they
Mhm.
were expecting to get the buses. Well, they froze it. They're not getting the buses, at least for now, but they still owe $800,000 to a vendor who installed the charging stations.
Right, right.
Um,
It's a bill they agreed to, and of course they have to pay their bill, even if the federal government refuses to pay their share of it that they promised.
yeah. So also, we've got Missouri farmers who
Hmm.
there have been these. I think there was a big video that went viral on TikTok of a Missouri farmer talking about the funding that has been stopped that was
A
directly
Trump
sent
voter,
to
no less.
farmers.
Yeah.
Yes. And, these things, again, they have real world impact here in the state
Yeah,
of Missouri.
Missouri is one of the bigger recipients of money from USAID to our farmers. The amount of food that we sell them that they then give to hungry kids around the world and hungry people around the world is just cut. And this is stuff that the farmers built up things relying on. A lot of them, like that guy that we saw, a small farmer. And honestly, I think that's partly because this administration, they don't care if they run all these small farmers out of business. They actually wouldn't mind if that happened. It's what they've been doing to rural America for decades, letting it just fall apart and hoping to then buy up the land with big corporate global farms. A lot of them not owned by American companies, even where they can be more efficient and make a lot more money, and also not really care about the environment around them or the communities that they're tearing apart. I mean, I think that's part of the plan. It's not an accidental, unintended consequence. It's a plan. But then, Joe, there's a third, not just the farms. The other big one right now is the NIH funding that they've tried to cut and freeze. That
Yeah.
goes to all of these higher institutions. Again, Missouri is one of the biggest recipients of
We have
this. We're
some big
talking
ones.
billions and billions of economic activity here in Missouri.
And
That's
NIH funding
jobs.
is just so people, in case they don't know, right? It's the National Institute of Health, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the reason that this funding and is an issue if it's frozen is because we have places like WashU that do a ton of medical research and things like that.
Yep,
So like they could be researching cancer as an
yep.
example at WashU, and they have a major research project that's going on, and suddenly the funding stops.
Hmm.
That means the research stops. That means the road toward curing cancer or whatever they're working on stops. And it has major impacts on the people who are working on it, the people whose
Right.
jobs it is, the people who
And the
came to
economies
Missouri.
that revolve around them, because it's not
Yeah,
just the people that work directly for those grant entities either, but all of the companies that get built in our state around that. And these are for, like you said, curing cancer, like for major health initiatives and advances in healthcare. They would rather those all be driven by private enterprise for profit, which is not what's best for public health. But we're also talking, they're the ones that are getting cut straight up because maybe they have something to do with equity or targeting specific populations that are struggling. That might be rural, by the way, places that don't have access to care. These are programs that are designed to help them, but it's also just universities in general. Changing the rules about how they're able to use the money when right now universities use those grants and they'll spend, you know, 25% or more even on overhead costs. And that means maintaining a university, like maintaining a department. And they're now trying to get rid of that and dramatically lower it so that now they won't have the funds to sustain their universities. Well, either universities start closing, which I think is some of their goal. Some of them would love higher ed and the press to just be gone, right? They see them as their liberal enemies because they are
sure.
fact based and evidence based checks on power. But we also have the people that, give me a second. That's Joe. You want to say hi?
Hey, hey, Finn, what's going on, girl? We got a new
Man,
guest on the show.
I've talked to people that are working on cures for epilepsy and understanding epilepsy better and neuroscience at WashU, and their funding's in jeopardy. But I think there's also another nefarious side of this, where it's not just about getting rid of the universities; it's making it so that if they want to stay alive, stay functioning, they're going to have to find other sources of funding. Well, their best chance of finding other sources of funding and research are going to be large billionaires and for-profit entities that are looking for research that specifically confirms things like maybe oil isn't so bad for climate change. Or look at these chemicals we're putting in our bodies. They're totally healthy, I promise. Or Monsanto, that's currently fighting trying to pass new laws in Missouri right here to make it where they can't be sued for causing cancer. Um, Guess what the
In
research is going to be funded by?
Peter, in the prologue of the film Idiocracy, you may recall that they specifically call out the fact that the world's greatest minds and scientists stopped doing research to further humanity and instead
Right.
focused on things like how to make people's erections
Yeah, Viagra.
longer,
Yeah,
because that's where the money was, because
absolutely
it's
right.
stupid. That was in
Yeah.
Idiocracy, and that's where we are.
Yep. That is where we live.
Yeah, that is where we live,
Yeah, but these are real. I mean, they're going to be major catastrophic economic impacts right here in Missouri. And I think that that's what people need to really understand. Like, this stuff is nefarious and awful and evil, but it's also going to hurt people immediately, like
yes,
very quickly, right in our communities. I mean, I live down the street from the International Institute, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to do any of the things that they need to do with a population that is growing in need because of how they're being treated by the federal government, but and the population in general. But also, their funds getting cut, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to function and continue to serve the populations that are incredibly vulnerable. We're talking refugee populations that are here legally, by the way,
yep.
that they're not going to be able to serve because of all these cuts. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on of groups I've heard from already that are struggling to figure out what they're going to do.
There's too much for us to talk about
Yeah.
all of them. There are a ton, and there's probably more to come. But the biggest headline overall is that Trump and Elon Musk are basically just deciding that if they don't like something in government, or
They're ransacking
even
it,
they're just going to ransack it, right? And that doesn't matter if the
pillaging
funding
and
is
plundering.
yes, it doesn't matter if the funding has already been appropriated by the legislative branch. They're going to do it anyway.
Well, look at what
And
they did in New York, Joe. I don't know if you read about that one, but they literally went into the bank account of New York City and took money out. Like, they just took it back. A bank account they shouldn't have actually had control of at all. They took it out. And this was money that was sent to them to pay for expenses that had already happened, that were
right,
already approved, already fully funded by the federal government. And now they're going, oh, never mind. We're not only not going to pay our bill, we're going to take back the money that we already paid. I mean, that is the most remarkable overreach. I mean, Trump is notorious for not paying his bills as a business owner, but this is like next level, right? This is stealing from the entities that they were supposed to have already paid.
yes, and so thankfully we've got multiple branches of government. We've got these things called checks
Do
and
we
balances,
still?
folks. Well, we still do for now anyway. And the judicial branch, judges are starting to say that they can't be doing this. So some of this stuff is being stopped. But Vice President J.D. Vance has already made a statement saying that the judiciary should not be able to tell the executive how to do their job. And Trump just this week posted that a quote that said, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." And if you don't know where that quote comes from, it's from Napoleon Bonaparte when he crowned himself Emperor of France. So that's cool. That's really cool. But maybe we have a knight.
Can we have the French
armor.
Revolution?
Yeah, maybe we have a knight in shining armor though, Pete, because Missouri's own Josh Hawley is now warning Trump that maybe he's going too far. Josh Hawley has said that they're welcome to complain about the courts, sure, but they cannot defy court rulings. Now, you may say, and you may be right to say, that that is a pretty weak criticism, but he is the only
It's a criticism.
He is the only prominent Republican doing that right now.
Yeah. Well,
so,
how's he voting on all the confirmations?
well, yes, of course, he's still voting right in line,
Yeah.
but it's not nothing. And between him working with Bernie
true.
Sanders on capping interest rates on credit cards, working with Elizabeth Warren on lowering drug costs, continuously going after monopolies, he does actually seem to be doing that, at least in word
there's something about his
action.
populist moves that seems like he thinks that that's going to be an angle that's going to help him. And I think some of that is, I think he's out of favor with the guys in charge, and he wants attention.
Sure.
And they don't really seem to like him. Trump doesn't seem to like him. Now, Peter Thiel, I think, donated a lot of money to his campaign too, just like he donated a record amount in the history of our country for Vance's Senate campaign, of course.
Sure.
But he still doesn't seem like he's in favor with them anymore, maybe because he's taken more of that populist angle. And I think there is maybe some hope that, like we've talked about, whether it's sincere or not, his interest in going that direction and the fact that they don't seem to like him might mean that he's one of the first that is willing to occasionally stand up to some of this. And
the fact is,
that has to set the precedent for others to do it.
That's right. Somebody has to be the first, and he is the first, right? Like he is actually in a not for nothing way.
Yeah.
Although
literally he's just saying, no, you do actually have to follow court orders. Let's just continue to get all of the judges in that we want in, that the Federalist Society tells us need to be in, that are going to agree with everything that a fascist monarch does in the presidency. So, I mean, let's not give him too much credit here.
The bar is so low, though. We're talking about he is a senator from Missouri right now.
I mean, McConnell voted against RFK, didn't he?
Yeah, conversely, you have Eric Schmidt, who's our other senator, who literally just flew with J.D. Vance to Europe when J.D. Vance basically tried to whip the European Union and tell them how bad they were, and gave support and praise for the far right organization in Germany.
Yeah. The ones that are actually wanting to do ethnic cleansing right there of non-German heritage,
treat
them as illegal immigrants.
They want to treat people with non-German heritage as illegal immigrants who are so
actual Nazis, guys. That's what we're dealing with. Actual Nazis.
Dealing with here. They're so far right, Peter, that the far right movement in Italy, who is led by the granddaughter of Mussolini, they have said they're too far right for them. They don't want to hang with them. This is, again, if a scriptwriter came to you and said the far right in Germany and Mussolini's granddaughter and all of this stuff, you'd be like,
Trump's quoting Napoleon to say that it doesn't count as breaking the law because I'm saving the country by being the great dictator that I want to be. And we've got Vance defending ignoring court orders in the same way. But who's Vance citing? Vance is quoting Andrew Jackson and saying, well, sure, the court may have ruled, but let him enforce it. Quoting as a hero Andrew Jackson. And Donald Trump, by the way, has also said he models his presidency off of Andrew Jackson. Well, that quote, whether it was real or not, it may be not actually a real quote, but is referencing his decision to go ahead with the Trail of Tears, Joe. The Trail of Tears after a court order said that they didn't have authority to do it. And he ordered it to go ahead.
So if people don't know, the quote was when the Supreme Court said you can't do it. And he said that the court has made their decision. Now let them enforce it.
Right. So his justification or his example of a president doing a good America first thing, Trump has described Andrew Jackson as an America first president. Their example that they want to model themselves after is going ahead with actual ethnic cleansing right here in America and pushing out and massacring Native Americans and a bunch of African slaves as well. That is their model. And quoting Napoleon and praising the Nazi party happening in Germany. I mean,
while we are censoring
they're not being
words,
subtle here.
While we are censoring words, while we are firing people in government who are minorities because we're saying that they are DEI hires. Like
I heard about someone in the military that just got a promotion revoked last week or maybe the week before because they told him he had been a DEI hire. They were pretty sure, so they revoked and undid his promotion in the military.
Yes,
I mean. They are not being subtle. They are not hiding it. This is white supremacists and fascists right now that are in control of our government.
It sounds like we're spiraling, but guys, this is actual reality. These are things
our country is in fact spiraling, Joe.
Our country is in fact spiraling.
We all need to wake up. I mean, when they literally have for a decade made it, or I guess really maybe less than that, woke is the enemy of the state. anyone that is woke is the word that they use for the enemy of the state, literally means someone who is awake.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? We all need to wake up.
Yeah.
Because it is a problem when your government wants you to be asleep and starts censoring anyone that they think is awake and not being a sheep following the fascist.
And it's not only that; it's also pretty ineffective. This way of governing. I mean, for example, right? We are blaming plane crashes on DEI. So not Trump firing
right.
Aviation officials from the
right.
FAA,
who literally
right?
are overseeing safety in our flights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, of course, DEI and the FAA didn't seem to cause crashes when somebody else was president, but especially in the woke administration, when I would think
because
that
anybody
would
that
be,
actually does hiring knows that the point of DEI in some place like aviation is to make sure that you are finding the most qualified people. It's to make sure that your blinders aren't preventing you because you think pilots are only white guys
yes,
from seeing a person of color who is actually a better pilot and
yeah,
missing them when it's making sure our workforce is better.
yeah, that's right,
Sorry, I'm not going to keep doing that over and over again. It just drives me crazy.
But it is true, and right now we're in a situation where we haven't had a commercial crash for like 16 years.
Right.
We've now had 3 over the last month. So Washington, Philly, and an Alaskan plane, right? Plus a plane that I guess rammed into a parked plane in
I saw that one
Seattle.
too.
There's some near misses. There's a bunch of stuff happening, but at least we have the guy who was formerly on MTV's Real World as our transportation secretary, and the answer.
Right. We finally have qualified people in all of these positions that have
That's
never had any experience with any of the things that they're overseeing.
And the answer from guys like this, from Sean Duffy, who is our transportation secretary, the bold step that he's taken to fight what's happening with all these plane crashes. He has decided to change the name of flight deck back to cockpit. I'm sure that'll do it, right?
Wait, are you serious? That's real?
That's real.
I haven't
That's
seen that
real.
one.
That
So
is
what's
real.
his reasoning? Is it, I mean, I can't see any reason other than he didn't think we should have gotten rid of the word cockpit because it's more masculine and macho, and he wants it to be like, this is the pit where the two dudes sit.
That's basically it. That's basically it. I mean, DEI caused us to name it flight deck, and that means that we were distracted, and we should just send everything back to being how it was before.
Right. Let's just infuse more racism into our government, and that'll make it better. That's literally what they're saying is the solution. We need to infuse racism in all of our government programs to make them better.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And of course, we have the NTSB who reports on plane crashes and shit like that from the government, saying that they're now only going to post on X.
Oh, yeah, right.
So they're not going to send the information to reporters,
which
anymore.
Of course is a for-profit private entity that then becomes
be a
the
member
official platform, and that you have to be a member of and give your private information to in order to be able to even see things on it. Owned by a private company, not the government, and that's the only place that you can see the official postings of. It's unbelievable.
So, but I want to take it back to Missouri because DEI is apparently so powerful that even in a deep red state like Missouri, there are real issues. According to Andrew Bailey, who is our state attorney general, Starbucks is too expensive and it takes too long because of DEI. So he is actually suing Starbucks. And in the suit, it claims that Starbucks workforce has become more female and less white. And he claims that is because they have been instituting discriminatory practices based on race that disadvantage white people, I guess, and men.
Literally, efforts to reduce racism in their workforce, he thinks, is racist.
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
He's
that's really how to describe it.
This is not the only lawsuit, right? So he also has joined 18 other attorney generals in threatening Costco, who recently said that they are not going to be bullied into removing their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts like other major retailers like Target have.
Right. So he's going to
And
sue a private company for having internal anti-racism efforts.
that's right.
But he's not going to join the other attorney generals that are trying to protect their state's funding that's being cut by the federal government illegally.
Correct, which is
He's
why
not worried
our
about
money is
protecting
still on
that.
hold. That's right. That's right.
But he will worry about going after a private company for trying to address racism.
Yes.
I
And
want to back up though to Starbucks. Like,
okay,
first of all,
please.
I go to Starbucks a lot. I actually had Starbucks today. Well, my kids like to eat the food there.
Sure.
And I got to say, it's actually pretty fast compared to most fast food out there. And I think when you look, especially since 2020, like lines and everything have gotten slower because people have been underpaid and overworked and understaffed, right? And our workforce shifted a lot. We lost a lot of people in the workforce. And so everywhere started taking longer. What's actually fascinating to me as somebody who goes to a lot of restaurants and fast food places, Starbucks is actually one of the ones that has handled this, weathered the storm, so to speak, better than most.
Sure.
Right. And that's partly because they continue to hire pretty easily because they pay their employees fairly well. I mean, there have been some anti-union efforts that have been problematic, but if we're comparing them to fast food and places like that, they pay better than a lot of fast food. They also have DEI programs that make people feel included and welcome, and even provide some health insurance, right? And so they actually, like, my line there is shorter than if I go drive through somewhere else. But he's not suing those places whose lines are actually taking a long time, where I've had awful experiences, right? And consumers have had terrible experiences. He's suing the one that's doing well, maybe in part because of their DEI efforts. And he's saying, but their DEI efforts are making them worse. I mean, it's the most illogical and awful thing until you realize, no, they just want to put racism back into everything. And anyone that's trying to get rid of racism or reduce the impacts of racism, they want to stop. And so they see Starbucks as one of those entities that's woke in that way.
And
Well, they
Costco.
want to go sue them. And Costco. So they want to
Yep.
go sue them. I mean,
But
that's all it is. It's that simple.
I've got some bad news for you, Pete. And this is, I guess, because bad things have to come in threes sometimes. It's not just racism. So Bailey also signed on to a lawsuit with 16 other attorney generals to end Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So this codifies the civil rights of persons with disabilities.
For 50 years.
It simply states that folks with disabilities can't be denied benefits or discriminated against because of their disabilities.
Right.
And the justification for this, well, it's because gender dysphoria was recognized by the Biden administration as a potential disability. And they don't like that. So
they're just
their
going to sue to
position,
get rid of the entire thing.
that's right. And then here's the thing. They have said, when pushed on that, they have said that is not true. That's just that's fervor being whipped up by folks on the left. People don't know. People are just they're making shit up, Pete.
Read the
504 is
lawsuit.
safe. 504 is safe. But in the lawsuit, it actually says that part of what they are asking the court to do is to declare Section 504 unconstitutional,
right,
as a whole.
Because, Joe, like we talked about, where they use immigration to go after other things like protests, they use it as an excuse to criminalize people and start treating the left as criminals that they can lock up, or minority groups as criminals that they can lock up. In this case, they use the issue of gender and transphobia, frankly, as an excuse to actually go after every vulnerable group, including folks with disabilities here. They're lying if they say they don't want to get rid of rights for disabled folks. They do, because they want to say, if I'm a rich white dude with a lot of power, I should be able to discriminate against anybody I want. That's their position. And that means if I don't want to take care of that person with disability, I don't want to respect their rights, I want to discriminate against them, I should be able to do that. That's their position. And they're putting that on paper. It says it right there. Their position is that law shouldn't exist. Let's get rid of it. And then to the public, they're going, oh, no, I'm not that awful. Mm-hmm. No, we just hate trans people. as if that makes it okay. But it's a
Yep.
small enough group that they're able to target it, confuse people around that issue, and say, look, we're on the side of sanity, right? This is common sense, guys. When really they're on the side of hate yet again. I mean, as I
Yeah.
said on the floor once, first they came for the trans people. First they came for the trans kids. They make it about them, but that's not all they're coming for either. And
Yeah. And
anyone
they,
else that thinks, well, it's just this small group and it's confusing issue, I don't know what I think about it. Well, guess what? It's a lot bigger than that. It's about all of our rights.
guys, they are so committed to this project. They're willing to erase words they don't like, ban
Mm-hmm.
books they deem unfit.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to use the
Mm-hmm.
full weight of the legal system to force the idea that America should be where rich, white, able-bodied, in quotes, men
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
hold their rightful place as the masters
Well, they
of
want to
the
go back to when they were the only ones with a vote.
yes. That is this is I don't believe
I
this is
mean,
hyperbole
what
anymore. I
they're
really
doing with
don't.
the Save, is it called the Save Act, about the voting rights that they're trying to pass,
Yeah.
to change it where your name has to match your birth certificate on your ID, and your voter registration in order to be able to vote. It's what they did with passports too, right? And you also have to have the sex has to be that assigned on your birth certificate as well.
Mhm.
So what we've seen already is trans folks that go in and they need to get their passport renewed. Well, they can't get it renewed under the new their newly identifying gender, because that's no longer allowed under the executive order. But then they've gone to go, okay, well, I'm going to go back to the other one, and they say, well, that doesn't match your ID. Um, and so then they're left with no passport, no ability to travel. Well, they would also have no ability to vote under this. But guess who else also wouldn't have an ability to vote? A lot of married women, because they no longer have a last name that matches their birth certificate. And it literally doesn't even provide the opportunity for them to say they can show their name change. It would just take away their right to vote. Again, they're just trying to go back to, well, if you're a married woman, your husband's voting for you.
Yes.
You shouldn't be voting. That's the world they want to live in. Now
I
there are these different groups up there, right? That's the Project 2025 people, and it's straight
mhm.
out of 2025. It's a Heritage Foundation, right? The social conservative crowd. Then there's the billionaire crowd that's just trying to loot and plunder and also take over and have a monarchy, and they're just finding it convenient to use the 2025 group to get there. But all of these groups are coming together for a whole lot of evil.
But it's no coincidence that those people, those tech oligarchs, are also mostly white men.
Yes,
So the Project 2025 stuff serves their purpose too, on all
right.
accounts, because at the end of the day, their purpose is that they believe that they are the true masters of the
Yeah.
universe. They believe that they are just that smart. They
I
are
mean,
that much smarter than everyone else because they have that much more money
right.
than everybody else. And so, of course, they should be the ones who run everything.
Right. They
That's
really do believe that your wealth is a measure of your merit. And so that's why they think the world was a meritocracy prior to DEI, prior to rights, because, well, it was determined by who had the power and the money. And if you had the power and the money, it must have meant you deserved it. And, you know, it's literally the opposite of common sense. Uh, we all know that money begets money, and barriers can make it where even the most talented and amazing and brilliant people can't get a leg up no matter what, with rare exceptions that break through. Uh, that's what common sense tells us about the world we live in, and it's what, of course,
yep,
logic does. But also keep in mind, you mentioned those tech bros. They come from these backgrounds. I mean, where did Musk's money first come from?
yeah. Well, he
Apartheid
was
South Africa, right? I
yeah.
mean, that's what he comes from, a world where that was how they structured things, and it worked well for him, and he's still living off the benefits of it.
And I think we've reached the end of our show this
Oh
week.
boy.
Not to bum anybody out, I guess maybe what we should do is there anything that you want to say to people, Peter, about like what they can do? Give a little bit of hope
It
that
depends on the day for me. Like, I often in the morning wake up with lots of ambition and optimism and motivation. And by the end of the day and various doom scrolling and whatnot, I start to lose hope. And it happens to be later in the day right now. So I'm not in a super hopeful place. But I will say, America has been through a lot, and the world has been through a lot in our history, a lot of really dark times. And there have been people that have been heroes in those times that have collectively led us out of them, and often to better places. I think that that's something we have to focus on, that we can, with a big view of history, get through this too. I don't know that I have the answers of how yet. I'm hoping that there are people out there that are starting to come up with better ideas than I have at the moment. And I've shared some of them on Facebook, of ways people can be involved. I think the biggest thing is being vocal, having these conversations, talking to people who were even moderate Trump voters, right? Who just aren't paying enough attention because they're dealing with their day to day to see all of this insanity happening.
Yeah.
And there are lawsuits to support. There are lots of really great organizations out there that are really putting up a fight in an organized way. There are groups putting on protests that I think we can all take part in, some more organized than others. And that's okay, because right now we just need to kind of voice our resistance however we can. And we need to take care of the most vulnerable people in our communities that are going to be hurting the most by all of this. That's stepping in and helping with some of the nonprofits that are struggling, and on an individual level. There's a
Might be
lot
a good
we can
time
do.
to donate to the ACLU as
Yeah,
an example.
that's an example.
But I will also add to what you have said. I think something else for people to think about is, now is also a really important time to take care of yourself. Now is a really important time for you to, maybe step away a little bit from the screen, but
Doom scrolling.
also, step away from doom scrolling, touch some grass, but also like maybe focus on just making sure that yourself is healthy, making sure that your family is healthy, talking to your family, maintaining those relationships, do your best to talk to your neighbors. Like, this is the time when it's going to be really important for us to have whatever community we can hold on to,
And supporting that
and
community.
and supporting that community. So I think, those are just, I know some of this stuff is like brush
Yeah.
your teeth, but
Yeah.
but honestly, some of that stuff right now is going to be exceptionally important. And that's money in the bank for later, when you're going to need it. Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope you'll join us again in the future, because we're going to keep discussing the important bits of news here in Missouri politics and dive deeper onto some other big issues facing our state. If you have thoughts or topics you'd like to see us discuss in the future, please leave us a comment. You can find us on all the major social media platforms. Just search for either Pete or me, or What's Up with Mo. Subscribe, follow, share, all the things. And
Please.
Thank you for spending a little time with us today.
Hey, if nothing else, thanks for letting us rant at you for a little bit about our frustrations with the world. I feel like I just got a lot of venting off my chest, which actually helped.
Excellent. Until next time, folks.
See ya.